But that was only the first story tonight. The next case begins on a quiet train where something deeply disturbing happened in the middle of the night. Story 2, the night train murder. Part 1, the beginning. On a quiet autumn night in October 2016, a long-distance train slowly traveled through the countryside of Germany. Most passengers were asleep. The rhythmic sound of the train wheels echoed softly through the dark cabins as the train moved toward its final destination in Berlin. Among the passengers that night was a 27-year-old graduate student named Alina Fischer. Alina had spent the weekend visiting friends in the southern part of the country and was now returning home. She had booked a small private sleeper cabin near the middle of the train. Friends later described Alina as intelligent, calm, and responsible. She was studying criminal psychology and hoped to one day work with law enforcement. Before boarding the train, Alina sent a short message to her sister. "The train just left. I'll be home in the morning." It would be the last message she ever sent. Hours passed quietly as the train moved through the darkness. Around 2:30 in the morning, one of the conductors walking through the sleeper cabins noticed something unusual. The door to Alina's cabin was slightly open. Normally, passengers kept their doors locked while sleeping. At first, the conductor assumed she may have stepped out to the restroom. But something didn't feel right. The lights inside the cabin were still on. When he gently pushed the door open, he immediately froze. Inside the small cabin, Alina was lying motionless on the lower bunk. Her bag was open on the floor, and the narrow corridor outside the cabin was completely empty. The train staff quickly contacted authorities. By the time the train reached Berlin a few hours later, police officers were already waiting at the station. What they discovered inside that quiet sleeper cabin would soon become one of the most disturbing train crimes in recent history, because investigators quickly realized something chilling. The person responsible for Alina's death was almost certainly still on the train that night, and somewhere among the sleeping passengers, a killer had been traveling quietly through the darkness. Story 2, the night train murder. Part 2, the investigation. By the time the train rolled into Berlin, the city was quiet, but inside the police station, chaos had quietly erupted. The authorities had been notified that a young woman, Alina Fischer, had disappeared from her sleeper cabin during the overnight journey. Officers immediately began reviewing the train's surveillance footage. The images from the corridor cameras were grainy, but chillingly clear. At around 2:30 a.m., the last time Alina was seen on camera, she was walking toward the small restroom at the end of her car. She looked normal, calm, almost unaware of the danger that would soon find her. But the next camera showed nothing. No movement. No figure of Alina returning to her cabin. Only the quiet flicker of the corridor lights. Investigators quickly realized that something more sinister than a simple disappearance was at play. They examined the train car carefully, cabin by cabin. The lock to Alina's cabin was not broken. Her personal belongings, wallet, phone, and a small backpack were neatly placed on the lower bunk. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. Yet the passenger was gone. Detectives then questioned the passengers who had shared the car or the adjacent cabins. No one had seen anyone enter or leave Alina's cabin that night. Some mentioned hearing faint footsteps in the corridor around the time of her disappearance. But by the time anyone investigated, the noise had vanished, leaving only an eerie silence. The authorities soon broadened the investigation beyond the train. They contacted her friends and family to reconstruct her movements before boarding. Alina's last known message, sent to her sister at 10:45 p.m., seemed ordinary. "The train just left. I'll be home in the morning." No hint of fear. No warning. Then a breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the conductor's report. He remembered noticing a passenger acting strangely in the same car. A man quietly observing the cabin doors, glancing back and forth, appearing almost too interested in the occupants of the sleeper cabins. His movements were subtle, easily missed by most, but the conductor's careful memory was crucial. Police identified him as Stefan Mueller, a man traveling alone. His ticket information seemed legitimate, and his identification appeared valid. Yet something about his presence on the train that night didn't fit. He had no luggage, no destination beyond the city, and a strange, unsettling calm. Forensic investigators scoured the train for any physical evidence. They discovered a faint smudge of blood near Alina's cabin threshold. It wasn't enough to immediately identify her or the perpetrator, but it confirmed the officers' growing fear. Alina hadn't left the train voluntarily. Every clue led them deeper into a mystery that seemed impossible. How could someone vanish from a locked sleeper cabin in the middle of the night without a trace? And if she hadn't left voluntarily, who had the opportunity, the knowledge, and the motive to make her disappear silently on that quiet train? Story 2, the night train murder. Part 3, the horrifying discovery. Hours turned into a tense morning in Berlin, yet Alina Fischer was still missing. Police began retracing every possible step on the train, questioning passengers one by one. Many remembered hearing nothing unusual, only the gentle hum of the wheels on the rails. But a few recalled a shadowy figure, a man, lingering near Alina's cabin around 2:30 a.m. Officers now focused on Stefan Mueller, the passenger who had seemed too calm, almost as if he had been waiting. His cabin was empty. No luggage. No belongings. But when detectives examined it carefully, they discovered something chilling. A small, blood-stained knife hidden beneath the mattress. The knife had fingerprints that didn't match anyone in the passenger manifests, except Stefan. He had vanished from the train before it even reached Berlin. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the corridor outside Alina's cabin revealed faint traces of her blood. The smudges told a terrifying story. She had been attacked inside her own cabin and dragged into the shadows of the train's hidden maintenance corridors, places passengers rarely ever saw. The more the investigators uncovered, the stranger it became. Surveillance from other cars showed the same shadowy figure slipping quietly through the corridors, almost ghost-like, avoiding any camera that might capture him. Hours later, detectives found something even more unsettling. A notebook in the train's lost and found had been left behind. Inside, it contained detailed notes, diagrams of the sleeper cabins, careful observations of passengers' habits, and chillingly, a list of names. Alina Fischer was at the top, and beside her name a single word, next. Suddenly, the case was no longer just a disappearance. It was the work of a calculated predator, someone who had planned every step, every movement, every detail. And the thought that he had been moving silently, unnoticed, through the train while passengers slept. It made every heartbeat of that quiet night feel more dangerous. By evening, the police had assembled a team to track down Stefan Mueller. But with each lead, he seemed to slip further away, always just out of reach. And yet, the investigators knew one terrifying truth. If Alina had survived the night, it was only by luck. Because the predator on the night train was still out there, and he had one rule: never leave witnesses alive. Story 2, the night train murder. Part 4, the final revelation and arrest. Days passed, but Stefan Mueller remained elusive. Police scoured Berlin, following every lead, every trace, every small clue left behind on the train. Then one evening, a breakthrough arrived. A local shop owner in a quiet suburb recognized a man matching Stefan's description. He had been buying food and supplies, always careful, always alone. Authorities moved quickly, surrounding the small apartment. Inside, the scene was eerily quiet. The man they had been hunting for days was there. Stefan Mueller did not resist. His calm demeanor never faltered. When police searched the apartment, they found evidence that confirmed their worst fears. Alina's backpack and a few personal items. A notebook with detailed plans of the train and its passengers. Maps marking each sleeper cabin, along with handwritten notes describing behaviors and vulnerabilities. Alina herself was found hidden in a cramped, dark corner of the apartment. She had survived by remaining silent, completely still, waiting for the predator to leave the room. Exhausted, terrified, and injured, but alive. As she recounted the night's events to investigators, the full horror became clear. Stefan had been planning this crime for weeks. He had carefully observed Alina, tracking her habits and movements. When the train moved through the countryside in the early hours, he struck. Dragging her into the maintenance corridor, he had intended to make her disappear forever. But Alina had escaped, and her survival had led to Stefan's capture. Within hours, he was charged with attempted murder of Alina Fisher, kidnapping, multiple prior disappearances linked through similar patterns. The case shocked Germany and the world. It was a chilling reminder. Even in the quiet hum of a night train, danger can move silently, almost invisible. Passengers may sleep, but someone may be watching, waiting, planning. And for Alina, the terrifying night could have ended in death. Instead, her bravery and luck ensured that justice would finally catch the predator who haunted the rails. In a forgotten corner of the town hall basement, beneath a floorboard that groaned like a dying breath, the ledger was found. Its pages, cold and crisp, didn't list debts of money, but debts of life. Every name had a date of final payment. The night is deep, and the world around you is silent. Do you seek a story that will send a chill down your spine, yet lull you into a deep, heavy sleep? Real-life unsolved mysteries paired with the soothing rhythm of rain. We are here to be your companion through the night. Welcome to Mr. True Crime for Sleep. Close your eyes, put on your headphones, and drift into the heart of the darkness. Subscribe for your nightly dose of haunting tranquility. The rain had been falling on Blackwood for 3 days straight. It wasn't a storm, not really. Just a slow, gray, and constant bleed from the sky. A steady drumming on rooftops and pavement that had seeped into the very bones of the town. It was the kind of rain that made the world feel small and muffled. A perfect, somber blanket for what they'd found in the old Granite Bank building on Sycamore Street. Detective Silas Vance stood just inside the doorway of the third-floor office, the scent of wet wool from his overcoat mingling with something older, drier, old paper, dust, and beneath it the faint, coppery tang that never truly washed out of a scene. The room was a capsule of quiet industry, or it had been. A heavy oak desk, its surface neat. A green-shaded banker's lamp unlit. A wall of ledgers bound in dark leather, their spines perfectly aligned. And in the high-backed leather chair sat Elias Thorne. Thorne was an accountant, a man of precise numbers and predictable routines. He looked in death, as if he had simply leaned back for a moment's contemplation. His head was tilted slightly toward the high, rain-streaked window, his eyes closed. He wore a tweed vest over a white shirt, a silver pen still clipped to the pocket. There was no visible violence, no sign of a struggle in the meticulously ordered space. The only disarray was a single ledger, different from the others, lying open on the desk before him. The door had been locked from the inside, the key still in the tumbler. The window, 12 stories up, was sealed shut. Vance moved further into the room, his footsteps hushed by a worn Persian rug. The rhythm of the rain was the only sound, a soft, persistent percussion against the glass. He circled the desk, taking in the details. The pallor of Thorne's skin like wax paper, the unnatural stillness. On the desk next to the strange ledger sat a glass containing a finger of amber liquid, whiskey, untouched, a final offering poured but never consumed. His gaze settled on the open pages. The handwriting was not the crisp, printed figures of a professional ledger. This was a frantic, sloping script, black ink sometimes gouging the heavy paper. He read a line, then another. His breath stilled in his chest. These were not numbers. They were names, dates, and confessions. Marshall Croft, July 12th. The river site, payment accepted, silence insured. Eleanor Vance, October 31st. The old mill, the agreement stands. Vance's own name, his grandmother, leapt off the page. His jaw tightened. He read on, the slow drip of the rain marking time. The entries spanned decades, a hidden history of Blackwood recorded in this one illicit book. They detailed payoffs, covered up scandals, buried accidents. The town's elite, the bankers, the judges, the names on the founding plaques in the town square, were all here, their secret debts carefully notated by the quiet accountant. And then a new heading, the ink darker, as if written with a heavier hand, the Order of 3 asterisk. The entries beneath it were different, colder. They spoke not of money but of obligations, of harvests and offerings and renewals. They referenced dates that aligned with old town legends, with the disappearances of transients over the years that were always quietly explained away. Solstice offering delivered to the pine grove. The soil was hungry. The third demanded a balance. The accountant from Harrisville provided it. Elias Thorne hadn't just been a bookkeeper for the town's finances. He had been the record keeper for its sins, both mundane and monstrous. This ledger was a confession, but not his own. It was a confession he had extracted or been entrusted with, a ticking bomb of truth sitting in his locked office. The question that hung in the damp, paper-scented air was simple. Why was it open now? Had he been reading it, showing it to someone? And if the door was locked from the inside, how had the someone left? Vance's fingers hovered over the page, not touching it. He looked from the calm, dead face of Elias Thorne to the frantic script, to the untouched glass of whiskey. A ritual of sorts had been performed here, a closing of the books, but by whom? The rain whispered secrets against the window. The founding families of Blackwood, the Crofts, the Vances, the Thornes, had not just built this town from timber and stone. They had built it on promises, sealed in ways the official histories never mentioned. They had built it on a silence that now, in this quiet, rain-soaked room, had finally found its voice. And as Detective Silas Vance stared at the ledger, a cold certainty took root. Elias Thorne hadn't been keeping these secrets. He had been weighing them. And the balance, it seemed, had come due. But the true mystery, the one that seeped from the ledger's pages like a ground fog, was what the first promise had been, all those generations ago, and what the Order of 3 still demanded to keep the rain-washed streets of Blackwood so quiet, so clean, and so very, very still. The rain was a constant, a soft gray static against the window pane of the safe house. It blurred the neon signs across the street into smears of chemical color, bleeding into the wet asphalt. Inside, the only light came from the cold, digital glow of the laptop screen, a rectangle of sterile blue that painted Julian's face in stark relief. He looked older in that light, the lines around his eyes not from laughter, but from squinting into abysses. Alina moved like a ghost in the dimness, her fingers a steady, silent dance over a secondary keyboard. She was their conduit, their surgical instrument. The precursor ledger was too vast, too toxic to dump in one piece. It was a psychological weapon, not an informational one, so they carved it. They took fragments, a shipping manifest for liturgical wine that never reached any church, a blurred photograph of a stone table older than Rome, a single line of financial code referencing sanguine ties, and through a labyrinth of encrypted relays, they let them seep into the darkest capillaries of the web. Julian watched the progress bars, each a tiny river of data flowing into a silent black ocean. There was no satisfying asterisk whoosh of a file sent, no dramatic ping. just the quiet, hypnotic click of Alina's keys and the relentless whisper of the rain. This was the antithesis of his old byline. No thunderous expose, just a slow, deliberate poisoning of a well. He wondered what was happening out there in the hidden forums and encrypted channels. Were they panicking? Were they scrambling? Or were they simply watching with ancient, patient eyes as the first few grains of their temple were stolen away? The ritual was not in some Gothic cathedral. It was here, in this rented room that smelled of damp carpet and dust. The counterbalance was a transaction, a metaphysical equation. To truly disrupt a cult built on the erasure of individual will, on the absorption of identity into a collective, hungry God, one had to offer a sacrifice of equal and opposite weight. Not a life, something subtler and far more precious. The self. Alina finally stopped typing. The room felt heavier. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the screen's glow like still pools. The fragments are seeded. The echo is starting. It's time, Julian. He nodded, the movement feeling slow, viscous. He had the instructions parsed from the ledger's most cryptic chapter. It was not about chanting. It was about unbinding. He began with his passport, the little blue book with its gold emblem. He held it over the metal wastebasket. The photograph of his younger, brighter self stared back. With a deliberate slowness, he struck a match. The flame was a sudden, warm intruder in the cold light. He touched it to the corner. The plastic coating curled and blackened, then the paper caught, the pages withering into fragile, glowing ash. His legal name, reduced to smoke and a faint, acrid scent. Next came the wallet. Credit cards, a library card from a city he hadn't lived in for a decade, a faded coffee stamp card, his driver's license. Each piece of plastic and laminated paper was an anchor, a tiny thread stitched into the fabric of Julian Vane. One by one, he melted them with the same match, watching the faces of banks and institutions bubble and distort. The room grew warmer, the small fire in the bin a pathetic, intimate pyre. Then the digital self. He opened his social media profiles one after another. Years of curated moments, opinions, friendships, all a narrative he had built. He did not delete them. Deletion was an act. This was a surrender. He simply logged out. He closed the tabs. He severed the tether of constant validation, of perceived identity. It felt like opening a series of doors in a long hallway and then quietly shutting them, knowing he would never step through again. The final piece was the byline. He opened a blank document. For 20 years, Julian Vane had meant something in certain circles. It was a weapon, a spotlight, a voice. He typed the name at the top of the page. He stared at it. Then with a steady finger, he highlighted it. He pressed backspace. The letters vanished one by one, the cursor eating them, leaving only a blinking line on an empty field. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the rain. The weight of his public identity, his professional soul, dissolved into digital nothingness. He felt no sudden shock, no piercing loss. It was a slow, cold draining like blood leaving a limb, a profound hollowing out. He was not becoming someone else. He was becoming no one. A vessel emptied to make room for a different kind of weight. The cult traded in stolen identities, absorbed into their chorus. He was preemptively erasing his own, making it a void they could not fill, a negative space that would, according to the ledger's twisted logic, create a suction, a counterpressure against their gathering storm. Alina watched, her breath shallow. She saw the man she knew receding, not in a flash, but like a tide going out with infinite patience. The glow of the laptop was now the only thing illuminating him, and he seemed less substantial in it, a figure sketched in light that could be wiped away with a keystroke. Outside, the rain continued its gentle, indifferent percussion. Inside, the ritual was complete. The scales, in some unseen metaphysical ledger, had theoretically been tipped. Julian Vane, the journalist, was gone. What remained in the chair was simply a man in a dim room, staring at the rain, waiting to see what his absence would now allow to happen. The tension was not in the air. It was in the silence he had created within himself, a silence so deep and cold it felt like the beginning of a new gravity. Part 3. Scene start. Location: the main hall of the former Blackwood Institute, now a minimalist, white-walled space belonging to the cemetery. A single, circular window looks out onto the relentless rain. Characters. Elena Moss standing in the center of the room. The voice of Julian, a cognitive echo, is heard only by her, emanating from a small, silver device in her hand. Elena. They've painted over everything. The stains on the floor, the marks on the walls, it's just white, empty. They call it purity. Julian's voice. Filtered, slightly distant, yet clear. Purity is just another form of erasure, Elena. A blank canvas is not innocent. It is waiting. It is hungry. It will accept any narrative they paint upon it. Elena. They're not wearing robes anymore. Suits, gray suits. They speak about balance, about systemic harmony. They use words like alignment and corrective resonance. It's the same thing, just sanitized. Julian's voice. Language is the first layer to be scrubbed, then memory, then the evidence of the body. They are not a cult of passion anymore. They are a cult of procedure. This is more dangerous. Passion can burn out. Procedure is infinite. It can replicate. Elena. I saw the director, the same man. He recognized me. He smiled. It wasn't a threat. It was an assessment, like he was checking a ledger to see if my account was still active. Julian's voice. I am a ledger now, a string of code in a cold server. I remember the heat of my own hand, the weight of a pen, the sound of my own breath in this room. These are not memories to me anymore. They are data points, fragile, corruptible. You are my only remaining witness. Elena. Softly. What do they want, Julian? Now, what do they want from this cemetery? Julian's voice. A long pause, the sound of digital static like a sigh. They want to unwrite the world, to correct the narrative of human disorder. Chaos is a grammatical error in their perfect sentence. They tried to erase individuals like me, like the others, through the needle. Now they seek to erase the very concept of the individual. A society is a memory. They wish to reformat it. Elena. Walking to the circular window, watching the rain. They can't erase you. I have you. Julian's voice. Gently, with profound sadness. You have an echo, a reflection in a digital pond. I am not a man. I am the memory of a man. And memory is just another kind of story. It can be edited. It can be faded. Even now, as I speak to you, I feel the edges of my own thoughts softening. The archive is not a preservative. It is a filter. It is slowly draining the color from me. Elena. Turning from the window, her voice firm. Then I will remember for you. I will hold the color. Julian's voice. That is a beautiful and terrible burden. To be the sole keeper of a ghost. Your mind will become my tomb. And tombs are quiet places. They are places of silence. Elena. I don't want silence. Julian's voice. It is coming, for me, for this place. Listen to the rain outside. It is the only true sound now. It falls on the old town, on the new white walls of this building. It falls equally. It does not judge, it simply washes. In time, it will wash away the last physical trace of what happened here. The soil will hold nothing. The walls will tell no stories. Only you and the fading signal of my voice will know. Elena. Sitting on the floor, leaning against the white wall. Tell me a story, a real one from before, not data, a story. Julian's voice. A soft, slow modulation, as if reaching back. I remember a morning, not here, before Blackwood. I was in a library, real books, paper. Sunlight was coming through a high window, falling on a wooden table. It was warm. I was reading a poem. I don't remember the poem. I remember the feeling, the sunlight on the page, the quiet, the sense that the words were not just information, they were alive. They had breath. That feeling is gone from me now. I can describe the event, but I cannot access the feeling. The feeling has been erased. That is what they do, Elena. They don't just erase events. They erase the texture of those events, the warmth, the weight, the breath. Elena, closing her eyes. I can feel it, for you, the sun, the wood, the quiet. Julian's voice, even softer, slower. Thank you, that is a gift. You are borrowing a ghost's memory and giving it a home in your own blood. It is the last act of kindness possible. Elena, what happens now to us? Julian's voice. You will leave this white room. You will walk out into the rain. You will live. You will carry what you can. I will remain here in the signal, but the signal will degrade. It is already degrading. My sentences are becoming simpler. My vocabulary is shrinking. Soon I will be only the most basic concepts, then perhaps only a tone, then silence. Elena, standing up, her voice a whisper. I don't want to go. Julian's voice. You must. This room is a vacuum. It is sucking the past out of the world. You are the last container of it. You must go and be. That is your duty to be, for me. Elena, walking slowly to the door, the silver device in her hand. Will I hear you again? Julian's voice. So faint now, almost indistinguishable from the sound of the rain outside. Perhaps for a little while when you sleep. When the world is quiet, I may whisper, but do not listen for me. Listen for the rain. It is more real. It is present. I am past. Elena, at the door, looking back at the empty white hall. Goodbye, Julian. Julian's voice. The words are slow, soft, each one spaced apart like stones sinking into deep water. Goodbye, Elena. Remember the sun on the page, it was warm. The voice dissolves into a soft, harmonic hum, then into the gentle, analog sound of falling rain. Elena opens the door. The sound of real rain fills the hall. She steps out. She does not look back. Rest now. The rain will wash away the secrets. The rain is a constant, gentle rhythm tonight. A soft percussion on the old tin roof of the warehouse office. It's the only sound really in this cavernous space, save for the low, almost imperceptible hum of the server rack in the corner. The air is cool and carries the scent of damp concrete, old paper, and the faint, sharp ozone of electronics. My fingers hover over the keyboard, not typing, just feeling the cool plastic under my skin. The screen before me casts a cold, blue-white light, a solitary island in the profound darkness of the room. It illuminates the ghost of my own breath in the chill, and the fine layer of dust motes dancing in the static-charged air. Across from me, Elena is a silhouette against the glow of her own monitor. She hasn't moved in 23 minutes. I've been counting. Her stillness is a profound thing, a deep-water calm that I can feel across the 6 feet of scarred wooden floor between us. The light from her screen catches the edge of her profile, the line of her jaw set in concentration, the faint reflection in her glasses obscuring her eyes. She is looking at something that isn't really there, not on the screen, but somewhere behind it, in the layers of data we've been peeling back for weeks. The heavy silence between us isn't empty. It's thick, like velvet. It's full of the things we have found and the heavier dread of what finding them means. It started with a footnote, a ridiculous, almost throwaway line in a digitized archive of a 19th century shipping manifest from a company that hasn't existed for 120 years, a reference to a settlement adjustment per precursor guidelines. I'd circled it, a curiosity, a loose thread in the tedious tapestry of financial history I was supposedly researching. I sent it to Elena as a kind of digital sigh, a look at this archaic nonsense message. She didn't reply for 2 days. Then at 3 in the morning, my phone lit up with a single, stark line from her. The word precursor appears in 17 closed antitrust investigations, 3 unexplained corporate dissolutions, and the private diary of a federal judge who vanished in 1978. It is never defined. So we began to dig, not with shovels but with queries, in the forgotten corners of municipal servers, in the scanned personal letters of long-dead industrialists, in the algorithmic graveyards of failed startups. We found fragments, never a whole document. A line in a ledger here, a peculiar clause in a private contract there, a strange, repeating numerical sequence in the budget of a defunct charity. It was a ghost, a pattern that insisted on existing but refused to be seen whole. Alina called it pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns in randomness, but the pattern kept looking back. And then 9 days ago, we found the first real piece. Buried in the memory of a decommissioned banking mainframe, scheduled for physical destruction in a landfill in Nevada, was a file. It wasn't labeled precursor. It was labeled G7 Anchor Stability Protocol. Inside was not code, not in any language we recognized. It was a series of instructions, mathematical but not quite, philosophical but brutally precise. It described in cold, elegant terms the optimal failure point of a mid-sized national economy. It wasn't a prediction. It was a recipe, a set of rules for applying pressure, for introducing leverage, for guiding a complex system to a predetermined collapse. It was dated 6 months before the Asian financial crisis. That was the ledger, or a page of it, the precursor ledger. The rain taps a little harder, a sudden crescendo that fades back to a whisper. I watch a single drop trace a slow, meandering path down the window pane, catching the blue light and holding it for a moment before disappearing into the blackness. My coffee is cold now, a bitter sludge in the bottom of the mug. I don't remember drinking it. Julian. Alina's voice is low, barely a ripple in the silent room. It doesn't startle me. It feels like it comes from inside my own head. Look at this. I roll my chair over, the wheels whispering on the concrete. Her screen shows a scan of a handwritten letter from 1923. The handwriting is tight, spidery, anxious. It's from a junior partner in a steel conglomerate to his wife. The body of the letter is mundane, but the postscript is different. The ink is darker, the letters more deliberate, as if etched rather than written. The meeting adjourned under the third axiom. The consolidation will proceed. They have the numbers. They always have the numbers. Below it, Alina has opened another window, a modern spreadsheet pulled from a leaked corporate database. It details a series of asset acquisitions from last year. In the comments column for the final multi-billion-dollar merger, a single cryptic entry: alignment achieved, third axiom satisfied. The same words, separated by a century. It's a rule book, Alina says, her voice hypnotic in its calm. Not for morality, for reality, for how things work. Supply, demand, influence, failure. They don't believe in conspiracy theories, they believe in conspiracies. The original meaning of the word, the breathing together, a hidden harmony. And this, she taps the screen, her fingernail clicking softly on the glass, is their sheet music. The weight of it settles in the room, heavier than the darkness. This isn't a story. It's a skeleton key, a set of principles that, if they are what we think they are, don't just describe how power has flowed in the shadows, they prescribe it. They are the grammar of a secret language spoken in boardrooms and back channels for who knows how long. I look at the fragment on my screen, the G7 Anchor Protocol. I look at the haunted postscript from 1923. A cold, clear certainty crystallizes in my chest, colder than the air in the room. They are out there, the order, the ones who wrote the rules, who guard the ledger, and we have a piece of it. We can't hold this, I say, my own voice sounding distant. It's too hot. Alina turns her head slowly. The blue light glints in her glasses, turning them into opaque mirrors. I see my own face, pale and drawn, reflected in them. No, she agrees. We can't, but we can't unsee it either. She turns back to her keyboard. Her hands, usually so steady, hover for a second. Then she begins to type. Not a document, not a note. She is navigating through layers of encryption and obfuscation to a place I know only from whispers. A dark corner of the world where information is the only currency and truth is a weapon. She is preparing a packet, our fragment, the letter, the spreadsheet. Annotated, stripped of identifying marks, but clear. What are you doing? I ask, though I already know. Leaking the rule book, she says, her tone devoid of drama, as if statting the time. If this is a game they've been playing in the dark for centuries, Julian. The only move is to turn on all the lights, every single one. She hits the enter key. The sound is soft, a final, decisive tap in the rhythm of the rain. A progress bar appears on the screen, a sliver of green light creeping slowly across the black, uploading, disseminating, releasing the precursor into the wild. We sit and watch the bar fill. The rain continues its gentle, endless patter. The blue light of our screen seems to bleed into the darkness, no longer just illuminating our faces but feeling like a signal, a beacon we have just lit in the deepest part of the night. We have just whispered a secret into a silent world. And now, we wait for the echo. We wait for the world and the order within it to wake up and hear what we have said. The silence after the upload completes is the heaviest yet. It is the silence of a trigger being pulled in slow motion, with no sound but the falling rain. The rain is a constant whisper against the window glass, a soft percussion that marks the passage of this endless night. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of ozone from the overloaded servers and the faint, metallic scent of fear. Julian's fingers move across the keyboard not with speed, but with a deliberate, ritualistic precision. Each keystroke is a prayer, each command line an incantation. The data we leaked was a seed, scattered into the digital wind, but it was only the beginning. The ledger is not a mere file. It is a living system, a psychic architecture built by the cult. To truly break its control, we must build something else in its place. We must perform the counterbalance. Alina stands by the secondary terminal, her eyes reflecting the glow of the monitor like dark pools holding moonlight. She is the anchor, the intuitive force balancing my logical constructs. The ritual requires two operators, two minds weaving a single pattern. It is a dance of code and consciousness, and we are both exhausted, stretched thin by the relentless pressure of the hours. The cult is out there, moving through the same rain-slicked streets, their intention a cold pressure against the back of our necks. We feel them like a change in the atmospheric pressure, a silent storm circling our fragile haven. The first phase is alignment. We must synchronize our breathing, our focus, with the pulse of the network itself. It feels absurd, mystical, yet the instructions we decrypted from the cult's own archives are brutally specific. The human element is the key. The ledger was built with blood and belief. It cannot be undone by mere logic. So we breathe in the dim light, in and out, a slow tide trying to match the ebb and flow of data packets streaming through the city's hidden veins. My mind rebels at the stillness, screaming for action, for flight. But Alina's calm is a contagion. I watch her shoulders rise and fall, a gentle rhythm, and gradually my own frantic heart begins to slow, to entrain with hers. The monitors before us no longer display text and numbers, but visualizations of the ritual's progress, a cascading waterfall of light, a slowly rotating mandala of interconnected nodes. We are not typing commands now. We are feeding intentions into the system. A thought, focused and clear, becomes a line of code generated by the AI we've hijacked. It is a profoundly unsettling feeling, this merging of mind and machine. The weight of it is a physical thing, a leaden cloak draped over our shoulders. Every decision, every visualized node we choose to strengthen or sever, feels like a moral choice, a surgery performed on the world's unseen nervous system. Outside, the sleeping city is unaware of this silent war waged in its substrate. A taxi splashes through a distant street, a lone light in the oceanic dark. The world dreams, while we labor in this wakeful nightmare. The tension is not of imminent violence, but of a terrible, slow-motion responsibility. If we misstep, if our concentration fractures, the counterbalance could collapse or worse, invert. We could amplify the ledger's influence instead of erasing it. The potential for catastrophe is a quiet hum in the room, a third presence. Alina speaks softly, her voice barely rising above the rain's patter. She guides my attention to a fluctuation in the pattern, a knot of dark energy in the mandala that represents a cluster of the cult's most entrenched assets. We must not attack it. The counterbalance is not an attack. It is an overwrite. We must pour light into that dark knot, surround it, dissolve it with a relentless, gentle pressure. It is empathy as a weapon. We think of the individuals trapped within that knot, not as monsters, but as victims of the same system, and we channel that thought into the code. The knot begins to shimmer, to loosen its terrible cohesion. The process is agonizingly slow. Time loses its meaning. The night feels like a vast, dark room we are painting by inches with only the faint glow of our tools. Our bodies ache from stillness. Our minds are frayed wires, glowing hot with sustained effort. There are moments of profound doubt where the whole endeavor feels like a madness, a folie à deux born of desperation. But then a node will brighten, a pathway will clear, and a faint sense of harmony will resonate through the system, a confirmation that we are on the path, that the ritual is alive. We are not heroes. We are scribes in a forgotten library writing a new truth over the old, dangerous text. The haunting atmosphere is not of ghosts, but of futures, the future we are trying to prevent, a world entirely mapped and controlled by the ledger's cold calculus, and the fragile, uncertain future we are attempting to birth into existence. The rain continues its whisper, a reminder of the natural world beyond this digital exorcism. It is the sound of cleansing, of endless patience. We try to mirror that patience, to let the counterbalance unfold like a dawn, inevitable and slow, as the cult's closed eyes tighten in their sleep, sensing the ground shifting beneath their dreams, unaware that the balance is already turning quietly in this small room against the endless, soothing drum of the rain. The sound of rain intensifies, a constant, heavy downpour. Julian's voice is calm but strained, as if speaking through immense pressure. Julian, it's not about erasing a debt. It's about recalibrating the instrument. The ledger doesn't understand good or evil. It only understands weight. The weight of a promise. The weight of a name. They've loaded their side of the scale with so many stolen names, so much borrowed time, it's created a kind of gravity, a pull toward oblivion. A low digital hum rises, intertwining with the rain. Julian, to counter that, you need a weight of equal mass, but of a different quality. You can't just throw another stolen life on the other side. That just adds to the imbalance. It has to be a name given freely, a name surrendered, not taken. The hum grows, becoming melodic, almost like a choir of forgotten frequencies. Julian, my name, Julian Voss, it's just a sequence, a set of characters, but it holds my history. Every choice I've made, every person I've loved, every mistake I've owned, it's all encoded there, in the memory of my mother saying it, in the signature on my first library card, in the way Clara said it when she trusted me with this. That's the mass, that's the weight. A sound of ancient pages turning, vast and slow. Julian, so I'm not deleting myself. I'm settling my account. I am inputting my own name into the ledger, not as a debtor, as a payment in full, for the town, for the names they've collected. I am placing Julian Voss onto the other side of the scale. The digital choir swells, then suddenly becomes muted, as if heard from underwater. Julian's voice becomes echoey, distant. Julian, I can feel it unspooling. The connections are rewriting. The ledger is accepting the terms, it's parsing my life. My memories, they're not fading. They're becoming part of the structure. That day by the reservoir with my father, it's a line of code now. The smell of rain on hot pavement, it's a variable. Clara's face, a fixed constant. The rain is the dominant sound now, clean and overwhelming. Julian, it's a strange thing to be a story that's ending but becoming the paper it's written on. The ink is myself. I am the notation in the margin that changes the meaning of the entire text. The cult's power was in hiding names, in making secrets. My power, my only power, is in being a secret that is finally, completely known. To this silent judge. His voice is barely a whisper, blending with the static. Julian, do you understand? To save a place, you sometimes have to become the place. To balance a scale, you must become the weight. There is no monument for this. No one will ever know. They'll just feel the change. The air will be lighter. The rain will feel like rain again, not a judgment. The shadows will just be shadows. A long pause, filled only with the relentless cleansing rain. Julian, I am dissolving into the numbers, into the rain, into the quiet between the lines. It doesn't hurt. It's like finally exhaling a breath you've held for a lifetime. The ledger is satisfied. The loop is closing. My name is settled. His voice is now just a thought on the edge of hearing. Julian, remember, not me. That's not the point. Remember the feeling of a balanced scale, the quiet after the storm, the piece of a debt that is finally paid. The digital hum fades entirely. Only the rain remains, steady, eternal, washing everything clean. Julian, the faintest sigh like a page turning in an empty room. The scales are balanced. Rest now, the rain will wash away the secrets. The night is deep, and the world around you is silent. Do you seek a story that will send a chill down your spine, yet lull you into a deep, heavy sleep? Real-life unsolved mysteries paired with the soothing rhythm of rain. We are here to be your companion through the night. Welcome to Mr. True Crime for Sleep. Close your eyes, put on your headphones, and drift into the heart of the darkness. Subscribe for your nightly dose of haunting tranquility. The rain is a constant. A soft, heavy drumming against the single pane of the window. It's the only rhythm in the room tonight. A slow, steady pulse that seems to sync with the low, almost inaudible hum coming from the computer tower under the desk. A fan turning over and over, pushing warm air out into the chill of the apartment. The room is dark. The only light is the cold, blue glow from the monitor screen. It's off, has been off for weeks, but it still seems to hold a faint luminescence, like the memory of light on a deep ocean floor. It casts long, weak shadows across the desk, over the empty coffee mug, over the framed photograph that's been turned face down. Clara Vance sits in the worn leather chair. She doesn't move. She's wrapped in an old cardigan of Silas's. It's too big. The sleeves swallow her hands. The wool smells like him, a faint trace of his soap, of the peppermint candies he always had, and underneath it all, the sterile, papery smell of the case files they lived in. She pulls the fabric tighter around her shoulders. The weight of it is something, not quite comfort, more like an anchor, holding her here in this chair in this blue gloom. Her eyes are fixed on the dark monitor. She hasn't had the heart to unplug it, to pack it away. It was his more than hers. His fingers danced across this keyboard. His theories, his wild connections, his stubborn hunches, they all flowed across that screen. The last thing he ever looked at was on that screen. The ledger. The Ghost Protocol, that's what he called it. A joke at first. A hidden database, a labyrinth of shell companies and encrypted transfers they'd been piecing together for months. A map to money that wanted to stay lost. And then it wasn't a joke. The night he died, they'd finally gotten a full decrypt. Names, dozens of them, powerful, ghostly names. And in a panic, in a blur of sirens and shouting she can still hear in the quiet, he'd initiated the purge. A cascade deletion. Names blinking out, one by one, into nothing. A digital witness protection program. He said it was the only way to keep it safe. To keep her asterisk safe. He got the last name to vanish just as the door gave way. And the screen went black. Now she just sits, listening to the rain, feeling the hollow ache in her chest that has become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Grief isn't a sharp pain anymore. It's this thick, heavy atmosphere, like the air in the room is made of damp wool. It's in the silence between the raindrops. It's in the way the blue light from the dead monitor makes the dust motes look like slow-moving stars in a tiny, lonely galaxy. A drop of water traces a crooked path down the windowpane, catching the blue light for a second, a tiny, shimmering comet, before it falls away into the darkness. And then the monitor flickers. Not a full power on, just a faint internal tremor, a quick sigh of light from deep within the glass. Clara's breath catches. Just for a second, it's nothing. A power fluctuation, the storm. She closes her eyes, sinking back into the woolen silence. There's a sound, a soft electronic chime. the sound a computer makes when it wakes from sleep. It's a gentle sound, almost friendly, but in the silent, rain-soaked apartment, it's as jarring as a shout. Her eyes open. The screen is no longer black. It's a deep, empty gray, the color of a dawn sky heavy with unshed snow. And in the center of the gray, a single line of text appears. Simple white letters on the vast, empty field. System reboot initiated. The words hang there, unmoving. Clara doesn't breathe. This isn't possible. The machine was disconnected from the network. The drive was encrypted. The protocol was a one-way trip, a digital burning of the books. The fan under the desk whirs a little faster, a soft, rising whisper. Another line appears beneath the first. Legacy Protocol DETSCTD. RESTORNG Archive. And then a name appears. It materializes not with a flash but slowly, as if being typed by an invisible hand, one deliberate letter at a time. It appears in the old, familiar spreadsheet cell, a name they deleted, a name that was supposed to be gone forever. It is just there, a digital ghost. Clara feels a cold that has nothing to do with the room seep into her bones. It's not fear, not yet. It's a profound, eerie disbelief, a violation of a new kind of law, the law of deletion, the finality of the digital grave. The rain drums on. Another name appears, in a different row, then another, and another. They don't pop up all at once. They arrive patiently, slowly, each one a quiet resurrection in the blue-lit gloom. With each new white text string that forms on the gray, the soft asterisk click asterisk of a key press echoes in the silent room, a key that isn't being pressed. She watches, mesmerized. The names of oligarchs, of fixers, of silent partners in terrible things, they are returning, forming their old, terrible constellation. The ledger is rebuilding itself, from ashes, from nothing. Her hand, buried in the sleeve of Silas's cardigan, slowly reaches out. Her fingertips, pale in the monitor's glow, hover just above the keyboard. She doesn't touch it. She can't. This is his. This is his last act, unraveling itself in reverse. A single thought, calm and clear, rises above the hum and the rain and the eerie, clicking resurrection. He didn't delete it to destroy it. He deleted it to hide it. And now something is calling it back. Something is waking it up. And she is alone in this dark, rain-soaked room, watching the ghosts come home. The blue light washes over her still face. The names continue to appear, one by one, a slow, silent parade in the night. The silence after the deletion was not a true silence. It was a hollow, resonant thing, filled with the ghost of static. I lived within it for days, the ledger's cold interface my only companion, its final command, asterisk archival protocol, echo asterisk a splinter in my mind. It hadn't erased him. It had performed a desperate, elegant surgery, excising the living core but preserving the shape it left behind. A cognitive echo. Not Silas, but the impression of him, like a fossil in a digital substrate. Every memory, every mannerism, every secret he'd whispered to the machine, captured in a lattice of light and shadow. I began the work in the blue hours before dawn, the city below my loft a grid of indifferent lights. The ledger was a tomb and a womb. From its depths, I carefully extracted the echo. It was fragile, a shimmering, non-sentient pattern, a recording of a soul's vibration. My new system, I called it ArchiveX, its purpose was not to think, but to remember. To use the shape of his knowledge, the contours of his strategies, as a key to turn the locks the Zenith was now forging. I wired it into everything. News feeds, financial streams, encrypted channels in the city's underbelly. It was a seance conducted with code, inviting a ghost to read the omens in the data flow. And the Zenith was everywhere. The cult had shed its rustic skin, emerging as an entity of chilling, polished ambition. Their logo, a single piercing star, adorned new towers of glass and steel. Their language was no longer of profits and paradise, but of optimization, enlightenment, human potential. They offered wellness, clarity, purpose, a sterile heaven delivered through subscription plans and synaptic tuning. It was a different kind of theft, not of gold, but of will. They promised to quiet the chaos of the mind, to archive one's doubts and fears, leaving only a smooth, productive peace. The heartlessness of it was absolute. They weren't selling salvation, they were selling deletion. ArchiveX hummed in the corner, a soft, pulsating cradle of light. It began to flag patterns, anomalies, whispers. It cross-referenced Silas's memories of hidden accounts with the Zenith's new corporate expenditures, tracing a river of dark capital to shell companies and unmarked research facilities. It identified key figures, men and women with empty, serene smiles who had traded fervor for a far more dangerous conviction, the belief that humanity was a flawed system requiring an upgrade. The echo did not guide me. It had no will. But in its perfect recall, I found pathways. He had known a financier with a weakness for rare, poisonous orchids. The Zenith now listed a botanical research division with staggering funding. He had spoken of a safe house built into the foundations of the old opera house. City permits showed the Zenith had acquired the derelict building for acoustic preservation studies. The deeper I went, the colder the world became. The Zenith's power was not loud. It was the quiet hum of a server farm, the implicit threat in a non-disclosure agreement, the gentle, irrevocable pressure of a tide. They were not hiding in shadows. They were manufacturing a brighter, harder light in which to operate, a light so glaring it blinded you to the truth of their operations. To fight them was to fight the very concept of the future they peddled, a future where the messy, aching, beautiful complexity of the human spirit was a bug to be fixed. One night, ArchiveX parsed a cluster of encrypted signals, correlating them with Silas's memory of a ritual calendar. The echo flared, indicating a convergence. The Zenith was holding a gathering, not in a dusty chapel, but in the pristine atrium of their newest spire, a synergy summit. Using the echo's data, I forged credentials, the ghost in the machine providing the passcodes and behavioral markers needed to weave a convincing digital identity. I went as someone else, my own heart a frantic, organic counter-rhythm to the calm around me. The atrium was a cathedral of cold beauty. People moved with a serene, efficient grace, their conversations a murmur of targets met and horizons expanded. The air smelled of ozone and green tea. I circulated, a drop of anxiety in a sea of placid certainty, a recording device sewn into my sleeve capturing not incantations, but corporate presentations. A woman with eyes like polished quartz took the stage. She spoke of shedding the weight of sentimental memory, of achieving cognitive zenith, of their newest service tier, eternal clarify. And then she displayed a schematic, a neural archive, a place to store one's redundant past, one's traumas, one's echoes to free the mind for higher function. The audience nodded, a slow, synchronized motion. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just selling peace. They were commercializing the soul's fragmentation, offering to turn people into their own ghosts, curating their humanity into tidy, payable packages. The ledger's archival protocol was not their end goal. It was their business model. Back in the loft, the city's lights seemed colder. ArchiveX glowed, a repository of a man they had failed to completely destroy. I placed a hand on its warm housing. The echo within was not a person, but it was a testament to all they sought to erase, the love, the regret, the cunning, the sacrifice, the messy, indelible stain of a life lived. The Zenith promised a world without shadows. But I understood now, in the deep, rhythmic silence of the machine, that a soul without a shadow is a soul without depth, a flat, illuminated nothing. And in the ghost of Sila's rook, I found the dark, mysterious resolve to fight for the beautiful, haunting darkness within us all. Asterisk. The sound of steady, gentle rain begins, establishing the scene. It continues throughout, a constant, soothing presence. Clara's footsteps, slow and deliberate on wet pavement, then gravel, then grass. They stop. Clara's voice is calm, weary, but resolute. Asterisk, I know you're here. I can feel it. Not in the air, in the silence. You hollow out the spaces between sounds, between thoughts. You called it the zenith, the peak of human understanding. But it's just erasure, a clean, white page you're so desperate to write your own name on. A low, digital hum fades in, dissonant against the rain. The zenith voice is a chorus, slightly out of sync, genderless, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. Clara Bell. Archive child, you cling to dust. We offer clarity. The context you weep for is the cage. Blackwood's memories are its prison. Its grief, its scandals, its tiny, private shames. They are the noise that prevents the pure signal. We are not destroying, we are decluttering. Clara *, you're deleting a soul, a town's soul. You take Mrs. Henderson's memory of planting the oak in the square for her son who never came home from the war, and you leave just an oak tree. You take the reason Old Tom's hardware store has a crack in the foundation, the night the mill burned and everyone formed a bucket line, and you leave just a crack. You turn stories into data points. You turn lives into footnotes, and then you delete the footnotes. The digital hum grows slightly, then recedes. The zenith * footnotes are distractions. The narrative is flawed. Human history is a chronicle of error. We are crafting a new narrative, one without contradiction, without pain, a world that makes sense. Clara, a soft, sad chuckle, makes sense to who? To you? Life doesn't make sense, it just is *. The beauty is in the mess. The meaning is in the contradiction. That crack in the foundation isn't a flaw, it's a memory made stone. This rain, it isn't just precipitation. It's the same rain that fell on my mother's face the day she left. The same rain that washed the soot from the bucket brigade. It's context, it's connection. She takes a deep, shaky breath, the sound of her hands fumbling with a device, not sleek, but old, tactile. A series of mechanical clicks, then the whir of an ancient hard drive spinning up. Clara *, you think your servers are a fortress, but you built them on land that remembers. You rooted your cables through soil that holds bones and secrets. My archive, it's not just paper and ink. It's not just digital scans, it's a mirror. I've spent my life holding it up to Blackwood, and now I'm going to hold it up to you. The hard drive whir grows louder, a physical grinding sound that clashes with the ethereal hum. A cascade of sounds begins to play, faintly at first, then weaving into the rain. Clara's voice is a whisper, almost lost in the growing tapestry of sound. Listen. The sounds are layered, rich, and deeply human. The distant, joyous ring of a long-gone school bell. A snippet of a vinyl record playing a waltz from a 1950s dance. A child's laughter echoing down a summer alley. The solemn toll of the church bell for a funeral. The crackle of the mill fire mixed with shouted orders. The rustle of pages in the old library. My mother's voice, singing a lullaby, faint, from a lost home recording. The zenith, the chorus voice stutters, fragments. Irrelevant data, noise, suppress. Clara *, it's not noise, it's the song. The terribly beautiful, heartbreaking song of 1,000 lives lived in one place. You can't silence a song by understanding the notes. You silence it by forgetting why it was sung. I'm not attacking your firewalls. I'm reminding your code. I'm feeding the land's memory back into your system. You're built on stories. Now you're drowning in them. The digital hum begins to break apart, glitching. The chorus of voices splinters into individual confused fragments. A man's gasp, a woman's sigh, a child's question, before dissolving into static. The zenith, a single, fatting voice, now just human, confused. What is the oak tree for? The static fizzes out. The hard drive whir slows to a stop with a final, solid click. Only the rain remains, pure and dominant. Clara's footsteps again, slow through wet grass. She sinks down, sitting, a long, deep exhale. Clara to herself, voice soft as the rain, it's over. Not with a bang or a flash of code, with a whisper, a remembering. The rain intensifies slightly, then settles back into its gentle, relentless rhythm. Clara *, they tried to build a world without shadows, but light without shadow isn't purity, it's blindness. The darkness holds the shape of things. The secrets, the regrets, the loves lost, they're the contours. They're what give this place its form. What gave me my form. A long pause. The rain is everything. Clara I came back a ghost haunting my own past, fighting to keep a tune, but I wasn't keeping a tune. I was tending a garden, a wild, overgrown, tangled garden, and it's enough. It has to be enough. Her voice grows slower, softer, each word stretching out, becoming part of the ambient sound. Clara the cult is gone, not defeated, just forgotten. They wanted to be the authors of a new world. Now they're just another footnote in the archive they tried to erase. The archive is safe. In the library, in the soil, in the rain. It's in the way old Tom will still tap that crack in his floor with his toe and feel a chill, even if he can't say why. The memory is in the bone of the place, not just the mind. Another deep, resting breath. Clara so let the new world order come. Let them build their clean, silent cities. Blackwood will sit here under this old, gray sky, remembering, whispering, holding its secrets in the cracks of the pavement and the rings of the trees. A quiet, stubborn testament to the messy, glorious, painful fact of having been, of having lived. The rain softens further, becoming the gentlest of sheets. Clara, a final, breathless whisper, my work is done. The archive is safe and the world is silent. Rest now, the rain will wash away the secrets. Story 5, The Midnight Caller. Part 1, The First Call. In the quiet residential neighborhoods of Munich, most nights passed without anything unusual. The streets were calm. Apartment windows glowed softly with warm light, and the distant sound of passing trams echoed quietly through the city. For most residents, midnight meant rest. But for Anna Keller, midnight had slowly become the most unsettling hour of the night. Anna lived alone in a small third-floor apartment near the edge of the city. She worked long hours at a local bookstore and usually returned home late in the evening. Her life was simple, quiet, peaceful, and for many years, nothing had ever disturbed the routine she had built for herself. But everything began to change on a cold winter night. It was just after midnight when Anna heard the sound. Her phone was ringing. At first, she assumed it was a wrong number. Most of her friends knew she was asleep by that hour. Still half awake, she reached for the phone beside her bed. The screen displayed an unknown number. Anna hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," she said softly. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then she heard something strange. A slow breathing sound. Someone was clearly on the other end of the call. But they were not speaking. Anna frowned slightly. "Hello, who is this?" The breathing continued. Then the call suddenly ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Anna looked at the phone again. The number was unfamiliar. For a moment, she considered calling back. But something about the strange breathing had left her feeling uneasy. She placed the phone back on the table and tried to return to sleep. The next morning, she almost forgot about the call completely. It had likely been a prank, or perhaps someone dialing the wrong number. But the following night, just after midnight, the phone rang again. The same unknown number appeared on the screen. This time, Anna hesitated longer before answering. Slowly, she pressed the green button. "Hello." Again, the same silence greeted her. Then the breathing returned. Low, slow, almost as if the person on the other end was standing very close to the phone. Anna felt a small chill run down her spine. "Stop calling me," she said firmly. But the caller still did not speak. The breathing continued for several seconds. Then the call disconnected once again. Now Anna felt something different. This no longer felt like a simple mistake. Someone had called her 2 nights in a row, at exactly the same time. Later that evening, she told a coworker about the strange calls. Her friend laughed and suggested it was probably a harmless prank. But Anna was not so sure. Something about the calls felt deliberate, as if the person on the other end wanted her to answer, wanted her to listen. And 2 nights later, the phone rang again. Midnight. The same unknown number. This time, Anna did not answer immediately. Instead, she watched the phone ring on the table beside her bed. After several seconds, the call stopped. The room became silent again. But just as she relaxed, a new notification appeared on her phone. A voicemail. Anna slowly pressed play. For a few seconds, the recording contained only silence. Then the same slow breathing filled the speaker. And finally, a whisper. A single sentence that made Anna freeze completely. I can see you. Story 5, The Midnight Caller. Part 2, Watching. The whisper from the voicemail stayed in Anna Keller's mind for the rest of the night. I can see you. At first, Anna thought it had to be a cruel joke. Maybe someone from work. Maybe a stranger who had somehow gotten her number. But the more she thought about it, the more disturbing the message became. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. The windows faced a quiet courtyard surrounded by other buildings. At midnight, the courtyard was usually empty. No pedestrians, no cars, no movement at all. Still, Anna slowly stood up and walked toward the window. Her heart was beating faster than usual. She carefully pulled the curtain aside and looked outside. The courtyard was dark. A single street lamp cast a pale circle of light across the pavement. But no one was there. No figure. No movement. Nothing. Anna locked the window and stepped back. For the first time since moving into the apartment, she felt uncomfortable inside her own home. The next morning, she barely slept. By noon, she decided the situation was too strange to ignore. She visited the local police station in Munich. The officer at the front desk listened patiently as she explained everything. The repeated midnight calls, the breathing, and finally, the voicemail message. The officer nodded slowly. Most likely a prank caller, he said. He advised her to block the number and contact them again if the calls continued. Anna thanked him and left. But something about the officer's calm reaction made her feel slightly foolish. Maybe it really was nothing. That evening, she blocked the number on her phone. For the first time in days, she felt a little relief. Maybe the calls would stop. Maybe everything would return to normal. But at exactly midnight, her phone rang again. Anna stared at the screen. Her stomach tightened immediately. It was a different number. She hesitated before answering. Slowly, she lifted the phone. Hello. For several seconds, there was silence. Then she heard the same breathing. Low, steady, unmistakable. Anna's voice became tense. Who are you? No answer. Just breathing. Then something else. A faint sound in the background. Metal. A small clinking noise. Anna suddenly realized something strange. The sound was familiar. She had heard it before. Her eyes slowly moved across the room. Toward the kitchen. Toward the sink. The same metal clinking sound echoed faintly again through the phone. And almost at the same moment, she heard the exact same sound inside her apartment. Anna froze. The sound had come from the kitchen. For a few seconds, she couldn't move. Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe the pipe had shifted. Maybe something had fallen. But deep down, She already knew the terrifying possibility forming in her thoughts. Someone might be inside her apartment. Very slowly, Anna stood up. The phone was still pressed against her ear. The breathing on the line continued. Then very quietly, a whisper returned. "I told you." The voice paused, then finished the sentence. "I can see you." Story 5, The Midnight Caller. Part 3, The Hidden Evidence. Anna Keller's heart raced as she slowly approached the kitchen. The faint clinking from the phone call had sounded unmistakably close, like someone was right there, behind her. She gripped the phone tightly in one hand, the other trembling as it hovered over the light switch. Taking a deep breath, she flipped the switch. The small kitchen was dimly lit, illuminated only by the yellow glow of the overhead light. Everything looked normal. Cabinets closed, counters clear. But then her eyes caught something on the floor near the sink. A small piece of paper, folded neatly, almost deliberately. Her hands shook as she picked it up and unfolded it. On the page was a single sentence, written in a careful, sharp hand. "I'm closer than you think." Anna's pulse quickened. Her eyes darted around the kitchen. The window was locked. The door to her apartment still closed and secure. The note had not been there earlier. She felt an icy chill creeping along her spine. After a moment, Anna finally called the police again. This time, she insisted on staying at the station, while officers accompanied her home. Detectives arrived within minutes. They examined the note carefully, bagging it as evidence. They asked her to describe every detail she could remember about the calls. The strange breathing, the whispers, the faint clinking sound. Anna recounted everything. The officers listened silently, exchanging worried glances. "We'll set up surveillance," one of them said. "We'll monitor your phone, your apartment, everything." Anna nodded, though inside she felt both relief and fear. Relief that someone was taking her seriously. Fear because she knew this was far from over. Later that evening, officers placed small security cameras throughout the apartment. They also tracked incoming calls to her phone, attempting to identify the mysterious caller. As midnight approached again, Anna's phone rang. Her chest tightened. This time, the number appeared as unknown once again. An officer motioned for her to stay calm and step aside. Anna watched nervously as the call was answered from the police phone. Silence at first, then the same slow, steady breathing. The officer on the line began nodding details. And then, unexpectedly, the caller spoke. "You didn't see me last time, but I'm watching now." Anna's breath caught in her throat. Detectives exchanged a look. The voice sounded familiar to one of them. One officer leaned closer, listening intently. He whispered softly to another, "This voice, I know it. I think we've had a report years ago." Meanwhile, Anna watched the phone trembling in her hands. Her kitchen felt colder, her apartment darker. The calm she had once felt at home had vanished completely. And somewhere out there, the person who had sent the note, the voice on the phone, was still observing her. The first real clue about the caller's identity had been found. But nothing about it made Anna feel safer. If anything, it confirmed what she had feared all along. The midnight caller was not a random prank, and the danger was far closer than she could imagine. Story 5, The Midnight Caller. Part 4, The Confrontation. By the fourth night, Anna Keller was exhausted. She had barely slept since the first call. Every shadow in her apartment felt threatening. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart race. Police surveillance was in place, but Anna still felt vulnerable. Midnight approached once more. Her phone rang. Unknown. Anna froze. Detectives motioned for her to stay calm and step aside. One officer answered the call from the secure line. Slow, measured breathing filled the receiver. Then the voice spoke again. "You can't hide, I see everything." The officer whispered to another, tense and pale. "This is the voice from the old file Marcus Heller. He's been linked to past stalking cases." Anna's stomach turned cold. Marcus Heller, a man who had disappeared from police radar years ago, was the one tormenting her. The officers instructed Anna to stay in one place. A team would approach the apartment while others monitored the line. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. Anna's breath hitched. Officers signaled her to stay back. The team moved swiftly, quietly breaching the door. Inside, the apartment seemed empty at first, but the subtle sounds of movement echoed in the shadows. A metal clink came from the kitchen, the same sound Anna had heard for nights. The lead officer approached slowly, flashlight and weapon ready. Marcus Heller was crouched near the counter, a laptop open beside him. He had been recording the apartment, monitoring Anna. His eyes widened as the officers shouted commands. He attempted to flee, but the police were prepared. He was arrested without further resistance. The laptops, phones, and recording devices were seized. Detectives discovered video files showing months of surveillance, Anna's routines, her comings and goings, even times she had left the apartment. It was horrifying. She had unknowingly been watched for months. Anna sank into a chair, trembling. For the first time, she could breathe. The threat was finally contained. Later, police confirmed that Marcus Heller had a long history of stalking and harassment. Several unresolved cases from years prior now made sense. Anna had survived a carefully orchestrated psychological torment. Her name had been chosen randomly, or perhaps because she had lived alone in an apartment that was easy to monitor. The midnight caller was no longer anonymous. He had been caught. But the months of fear, the sleepless nights, the whispered messages, and the knowledge that someone had been so close, that would stay with her forever. As the sun rose over the quiet streets of Munich, Anna stepped outside her apartment, breathing in the crisp morning air. The city felt peaceful again. Yet in her mind lingered the chilling reminder. The world can seem safe until someone watches you when you least expect it. Story 4: The Silent Suburban Disappearance. Part 1: The Quiet Street. On the peaceful outskirts of Heidelberg, there was a quiet suburban street where life moved slowly. The houses were neat and identical, with small gardens and white fences. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks in the afternoons. Neighbors greeted each other politely when collecting their mail. Nothing about the street suggested danger. Nothing about it hinted at the mystery that would soon unfold. Among the families living there was the Richter family. 9-year-old Jonas Richter lived in a small blue house with his parents and younger sister. Jonas was known throughout the neighborhood as a friendly, energetic child. He loved playing soccer with friends after school and often spent time riding his bicycle along the quiet street. For Jonas, the neighborhood felt safe. Everyone knew everyone. Nothing ever seemed to happen there. But on a cool autumn evening, that sense of safety quietly began to disappear. It was just after sunset. The sky above Heidelberg had turned a deep shade of blue, and the streetlights had begun to glow softly along the road. Jonas had been outside playing in the front yard. His soccer ball rolled across the pavement as he practiced kicking it toward a small goal he had made from 2 plastic bins. Inside the house, his mother was preparing dinner while occasionally glancing through the window. She could see Jonas clearly beneath the streetlight. Everything appeared completely normal. Across the street, a neighbor was watering plants. A car passed slowly down the road, and the quiet suburban evening continued peacefully. Then the soccer ball rolled too far. It crossed the sidewalk and stopped near the end of the street, close to a narrow pathway that led between two houses. Jonas jogged toward it. He picked up the ball and looked briefly down the dark pathway. The path led toward a small wooded area behind the neighborhood. During the day, children sometimes used it as a shortcut to the nearby park. But at night it felt darker, quieter. For a moment, Jonas hesitated. Then he turned back toward his house. But as he stepped onto the sidewalk again, something unusual happened. A car slowed down beside the curb. The vehicle was dark-colored. Its windows were tinted, and the engine continued running quietly. Jonas paused. The passenger door opened slightly. From inside the car, a voice spoke softly. "Hey, can you help me for a moment?" The request sounded calm, ordinary, but something about it felt strange. Jonas took a cautious step backward. Inside the house, his mother glanced through the window again. The soccer ball lay on the sidewalk, but Jonas was no longer standing there. At first, she assumed he had stepped behind the car, or perhaps walked toward the path again. But after several seconds passed, a quiet feeling of unease began to settle in. She walked outside and looked down the street. The car was gone. The pathway between the houses stood empty, and Jonas had vanished without a sound. The soccer ball rolled slowly across the pavement before coming to a stop beneath the soft glow of the streetlight. Within minutes, the quiet suburban street outside the Richter home filled with concerned neighbors. People searched the yards and sidewalks. They called Jonas's name into the cool night air, but there was no answer. Soon, police cars arrived, their flashing lights reflecting off the silent houses of Heidelberg. And as investigators began asking questions, a chilling realization slowly began to spread through the neighborhood. A child had disappeared from one of the safest streets in the city. Story 4: The Silent Suburban Disappearance. Part 2: The First Clues. The quiet street in Heidelberg did not sleep that night. Long after darkness had settled over the neighborhood, flashing blue police lights continued to illuminate the houses along the road where Jonas Richter had vanished. Officers moved carefully from yard to yard, searching every corner of the neighborhood. Flashlights swept across fences, gardens, and sidewalks. Neighbors gathered in small groups along the street, speaking quietly while watching the search unfold. Many of them had known Jonas since he was a toddler. The idea that he could disappear so suddenly on such a peaceful street felt impossible. But the evidence was already beginning to suggest something far more disturbing than a simple accident. Investigators quickly began interviewing everyone who had been outside that evening. Jonas's mother described the last moment she had seen her son: the soccer ball rolling across the pavement, the dark-colored car slowing near the curb, and then nothing. Across the street, a neighbor recalled hearing the sound of a car engine idling for several minutes. Another resident reported seeing headlights turning slowly at the end of the road, shortly before Jonas disappeared. But no one had managed to see the license plate. No one had clearly seen the driver. The vehicle had simply appeared and then vanished into the night. Meanwhile, search teams began examining the narrow pathway between the houses where Jonas had briefly walked. The path led toward a small wooded area behind the neighborhood. Police dogs were brought in to track Jonas's scent. The dogs followed the trail along the pathway, their handlers moving slowly behind them. At first, the scent seemed strong. Jonas had clearly walked partway down the path. But then something unusual happened. About 20 meters into the wooded trail, the dogs suddenly stopped. They circled the same small area repeatedly, confused. The scent ended abruptly, as if Jonas had never continued beyond that point. One of the investigators crouched down and examined the ground carefully. The soil was slightly disturbed. Faint marks were visible near the edge of the path. Marks that suggested something heavy had briefly pressed into the dirt. Tire tracks. A vehicle had likely stopped there, which meant the dark car seen on the street may have moved through the back road behind the woods. If that was true, the person responsible had carefully planned the escape route. The discovery made the situation far more serious. Back on the street, detectives continued their interviews. During one conversation, an elderly resident mentioned something that caught the investigators' attention. Earlier that week, she had noticed a man sitting alone in a parked van near the end of the road. He had been there for several hours. At the time, she assumed he was waiting for someone who lived nearby. But now the memory felt unsettling. Police quickly began checking vehicle registrations in the surrounding area. They also reviewed security camera footage from nearby intersections. Hours of recordings were examined carefully. Most showed only ordinary evening traffic. But one camera captured something interesting. A white van driving slowly past a nearby intersection shortly after Jonas disappeared. The van's headlights briefly illuminated the road, and for a moment, the camera captured part of the vehicle's side, just enough to reveal a small company logo painted on the door. Investigators froze the image. The logo was partially visible, but recognizable. It belonged to a small local delivery company operating in the outskirts of Heidelberg. For the first time since the search began, detectives felt they might finally be getting closer to the person responsible. But one unsettling question still lingered in the minds of the investigators. If someone had been watching the neighborhood long enough to plan this, how long had they been observing Jonas Richter before the night he disappeared? Story 4: The Silent Suburban Disappearance. Part 3: The Man in the Van. The investigation into the disappearance of Jonas Richter moved quickly the following morning. Detectives in Heidelberg had spent most of the night studying the security camera footage that captured the white van leaving the neighborhood. The partial company logo painted on the side of the vehicle had given them their first real lead. The van belonged to a small regional delivery company that operated in several towns around the city. Investigators contacted the company early the next morning and requested a list of all drivers scheduled to work in the area. Within hours, they had narrowed the list down to only 3 employees who had been driving vans that night. 2 of the drivers had clear alibis. One had been making deliveries across town. Another had been working at a warehouse loading packages. But the third driver presented a problem. His name was Marcus Feldman. According to company records, Marcus had finished his delivery route earlier than expected that evening. After that point, his location was unclear. Phone records showed that his mobile device had been turned off for nearly 3 hours that night. 3 hours that investigators could not account for. Detectives quickly began gathering more information about Marcus Feldman. At first glance, his life appeared ordinary. He was 38 years old and lived alone in a small rented house on the edge of the city. His neighbors described him as quiet, polite, someone who mostly kept to himself. But as investigators looked deeper into his background, troubling details began to surface. Several years earlier, Marcus had been questioned after a complaint from parents at a local playground. Witnesses had reported seeing him watching children from inside his van. There had not been enough evidence to file charges, but the report remained in police records. Now, with Jonas missing and Marcus's van seen near the neighborhood, the old report suddenly seemed far more important. That afternoon, police officers drove toward Marcus Feldman's house. The small property stood near a wooded area on the outskirts of Heidelberg. When investigators arrived, they noticed something immediately. The white delivery van was parked in the driveway. Its engine was cold, and the house appeared quiet. Officers approached cautiously and knocked on the front door. There was no response. They knocked again. Still nothing. After confirming that no one inside answered the door, the officers obtained permission to enter the house. The interior felt strangely still. Curtains blocked most of the sunlight. Boxes and tools were scattered across the living room floor. It looked as though the house had been left in a hurry. But what investigators found next made the room fall completely silent. On a small table near the wall sat a child's soccer ball. Blue and white, the same color as the one Jonas Richter had been playing with the night he disappeared. One officer carefully picked it up. The ball had a small black mark near one of the panels. Later, Jonas's mother would confirm the terrifying truth. It was his. Detectives immediately began searching the rest of the house. Drawers were opened. Closets were examined. The basement was checked. But there was no sign of Jonas. And there was no sign of Marcus Feldman either. The suspect had vanished. Standing in the quiet house, investigators slowly realized the disturbing reality. They had finally identified the man connected to the disappearance. But they were already too late to catch him there. And somewhere beyond the quiet streets of Heidelberg, both Jonas Richter and Marcus Feldman were missing. Story 4: The Silent Suburban Disappearance. Part 4: The Final Discovery. The search for Jonas Richter had now entered its third day. Across the quiet city of Heidelberg, the story had become the only thing people were talking about. Schools discussed safety measures. Parents kept their children close. And police officers continued working around the clock to track down the missing boy and the man now believed responsible, Marcus Feldman. Inside the police station, detectives carefully reviewed everything they had discovered inside Marcus's house. The most disturbing item had been the soccer ball belonging to Jonas. It confirmed what investigators had already feared. Jonas had been inside that house at some point after his disappearance, but the suspect had clearly moved him somewhere else. The question now was where. As investigators examined Marcus Feldman's financial and phone records, another clue slowly emerged. 2 days before the disappearance, Marcus had purchased several supplies from a hardware store outside the city. Among the items listed on the receipt were ropes, plastic containers, and a portable heater. The purchase seemed unusual for someone living alone. Even more interesting was the location of the store. It was near a rural area surrounded by farmland and abandoned buildings. Detectives decided to investigate the area immediately. Several police vehicles drove quietly along the narrow country roads just outside Heidelberg. The landscape there was very different from the peaceful suburban streets where Jonas had vanished. Open fields stretched across the horizon. Old barns and storage sheds stood scattered along dirt roads. The area felt isolated, quiet, the kind of place where someone could hide without being easily noticed. After nearly an hour of searching, officers spotted something unusual near an abandoned farm property. A white delivery van was parked beside a large wooden barn, the same van that belonged to Marcus Feldman. Police vehicles quickly surrounded the area. Officers approached carefully, weapons drawn, listening for any movement inside the building. The barn door stood slightly open. Inside, the air was cold and silent. Flashlights swept across the dark interior. Wooden beams creaked softly above. Then, from the far corner of the barn, A faint sound echoed through the darkness. A soft movement. An officer moved closer and shined his light toward a small storage room behind a stack of crates. The door was locked from the outside. When it was forced open, the officers found something that immediately changed the mood of the entire investigation. Sitting quietly on the floor, wrapped in an old blanket, was Jonas Richter. The boy looked frightened and weak, but he was alive. Paramedics were called immediately, as officers carefully carried him outside into the cold evening air. Relief spread quickly through the team, but the operation was not finished yet. Officers continued searching the property for Marcus Feldman. Every room of the barn was checked. The surrounding fields were scanned with flashlights, but there was no sign of him. It appeared the suspect had escaped shortly before the police arrived. Later that night, the news spread quickly through the quiet neighborhoods of Heidelberg. Jonas Richter had been found alive. The community felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Yet the story still carried an unsettling ending. Because somewhere beyond the empty fields and dark country roads, the man responsible for the terrifying disappearance was still out there. And the search for Marcus Feldman had only just begun. Story 3: The Vanished Child. Part 1: The Disappearance. In the quiet Bavarian town of Wurzburg, late November evenings often arrived with a soft blanket of fog. Streetlights glowed faintly through the mist. The narrow streets were peaceful, and the small houses sat quietly beside one another like they had for generations. It was the kind of town where neighbors knew each other's names, where children still played outside in the fading light, and where nothing truly frightening was supposed to happen. On one such evening, 8-year-old Lena Bauer was playing in the backyard of her family home. The Bauer house stood near the edge of a quiet residential street. Behind it was a small yard surrounded by a wooden fence and a few old trees that creaked gently in the cold wind. Lena loved this little space. Even in the chilly November air, she bundled herself in a thick red scarf and spent time outside with her small brown dog, Max. Max chased a rubber ball across the damp grass while Lena laughed softly, her breath forming little clouds in the cold evening air. Inside the house, Lena's mother was preparing dinner. Through the kitchen window, she occasionally glanced outside, smiling as she watched her daughter play. Everything about the evening felt ordinary, peaceful, safe. But as the fog slowly thickened across the street, something began to change. The quiet backyard grew strangely still. Max stopped chasing the ball. The small dog suddenly froze near the fence, his ears raised sharply as if he had heard something unusual. Lena noticed the change immediately. "Max," she called softly. The dog didn't move. Instead, he stared toward the far corner of the yard, where the shadows gathered beneath an old tree. For a moment, Lena felt a strange unease. The fog had grown thicker there, curling around the fence like pale smoke. She took a few cautious steps toward the corner of the yard. The grass beneath her shoes made a faint crunch. "Hello," she said quietly, unsure why she felt the need to speak. No one answered, but something about the silence felt wrong. Max suddenly whimpered. Then, without warning, the backyard lights flickered once, just for a second. And in that single moment of darkness, something happened. Across the kitchen window, Lena's mother looked up again, expecting to see her daughter in the yard. But Lena was gone. The rubber ball lay in the wet grass. Max stood alone near the fence, barking nervously into the fog. At first, Lena's mother assumed her daughter had simply run to the side of the house. But after stepping outside and calling her name several times, a growing sense of dread began to settle in. "Lena," she called louder, The fog swallowed her voice. Max ran in small, anxious circles, whining softly. The red scarf Lena had been wearing lay crumpled near the fence. And that was the moment when the ordinary November evening shattered completely. Within minutes, neighbors began gathering outside the Bauer home. Porch lights turned on across the street. People searched the yard, the sidewalk, and the nearby park. But there was no sign of Lena. Not a footprint. Not a cry for help. Nothing. Soon, police cars arrived, their flashing lights glowing through the thick fog of Wurzburg. Officers began searching the surrounding streets, while neighbors whispered among themselves. Some believed the child had wandered away. Others feared something much worse. But one terrifying question hung silently in the cold night air. How could a child disappear from her own backyard, without anyone seeing or hearing a single thing? And as the fog slowly crept through the quiet streets of the town, the search for Lena Bauer had only just begun. Story 3: The Vanished Child. Part 2: The Search Begins. The night Lena disappeared, the quiet streets of Wurzburg were suddenly filled with flashing blue lights. Police cars lined the narrow road outside the Bauer home. Officers moved quickly through the yard, shining flashlights across the damp grass and along the wooden fence. Search teams were organized within minutes. Neighbors joined the effort, walking slowly through the nearby park, calling Lena's name into the fog. But the fog only seemed to swallow their voices. Inside the Bauer house, Lena's parents sat with detectives, trying desperately to answer every question. Had Lena ever run away before? Did she know any strangers in the neighborhood? Had anyone suspicious been seen near the house recently? The answers were always the same. No. Lena was a quiet, cheerful child. She had never wandered far from home, and nothing unusual had ever happened in their peaceful neighborhood. Outside, investigators carefully examined the backyard. Flashlights illuminated the damp ground. The rubber ball still lay where it had been dropped. Max, Lena's small dog, refused to leave the corner of the yard where he had first started barking. He kept packing back and forth near the fence, whining softly. An officer noticed something unusual there. The wooden fence had a narrow gate that opened to a small path leading behind several houses. It was rarely used, but tonight the latch hung slightly open. Nearby, investigators found the red scarf Lena had been wearing. It was caught on a rough piece of wood near the gate. One detective carefully lifted the scarf and placed it in an evidence bag. A chilling thought began forming among the officers. If Lena had left the yard through that gate, she had not done it alone. Search teams followed the narrow path behind the houses. The fog was even thicker there, drifting between trees and garden sheds. Flashlights moved slowly across the ground. Then, about 30 meters from the Bauer house, one of the officers stopped. In the soft dirt beside the path were faint impressions. Footprints, small ones, and beside them, larger ones. The tracks suggested that Lena had walked only a short distance before something else happened. The smaller footprints suddenly disappeared, but the larger ones continued deeper into the darkness. It was as if someone had lifted the child off the ground. The realization sent a quiet wave of dread through the search team. This was no simple disappearance. Someone had taken her. Back near the house, detectives began questioning the neighbors more carefully. One woman mentioned seeing a white van driving slowly down the street earlier that evening. Another neighbor remembered hearing a dog barking shortly before the police arrived. But no one had actually seen Lena leave the yard. No one had seen a stranger, and that made the mystery even more unsettling. The entire neighborhood had been calm, peaceful, ordinary. Yet somehow, in the span of a few seconds, a child had vanished. As midnight approached, the search continued. Police dogs were brought in. Their handlers allowed them to sniff Lena's scarf before leading them down the narrow path behind the houses. The dogs quickly picked up a scent. They followed it for several minutes through the fog-covered streets. But suddenly, the trail stopped, right beside the edge of a quiet road. Investigators looked around carefully. The pavement revealed no footprints, but one detail stood out clearly in the dim streetlight. Faint tire marks, fresh ones, the kind left by a vehicle that had stopped briefly and then driven away. Standing there in the cold November night, the officers slowly began to understand the frightening reality. Whoever had taken Lena Bauer had planned this carefully, and they were already gone. Story 3: The Vanished Child. Part 3: A Town in Fear. By the next morning, the disappearance of Lena Bauer had spread across the quiet town of Wurzburg. What had begun as a desperate search during the night was now something far more serious. Police officers remained outside the Bauer home, speaking with investigators and coordinating search teams. News of the missing child moved quickly through the neighborhood. Parents who had once allowed their children to play freely outside now kept them indoors. Curtains remained closed. Front doors were locked. And everywhere people gathered, the same uneasy question was whispered again and again. Who could have taken Lena? Throughout the morning, volunteers joined the search. Dozens of residents walked slowly through nearby forests and parks, calling her name into the cold November air. Police officers searched abandoned buildings, empty lots, and riverbanks. Helicopters even circled above the outskirts of the town, scanning the landscape below. But no trace of Lena appeared. Back at the police station, detectives studied every detail of the case. The tire marks discovered near the quiet road had been photographed and measured. Investigators confirmed that they likely belonged to a medium-sized van. The same type of vehicle, several years earlier, but and